we have to take a test, since I have to evaluate how you're doing. And we will do that next week. I may dismiss a little early so the rest of them can eat donuts and whatever while you're taking your midterm, for those that are taking it for credit. So it'll be brief. I just have to have something to provide, something to evaluate. So next week, look at that. All right, you remember last week we had 2 outlines, and the grand plan was to get through both of them. The grand plan didn't work. So if you'll look at last week's, if you've got that with you, if not, just follow along and kind of remember. But if you'll open your Bibles now to Genesis, last week's outline, and we were down to Roman numeral 2, the decision. The decision. Adam, in the death of a lamb for a covering, got a show and tell lesson in anatomy and physiology. And he must have mused, so that's what Shirley Dye is all about. I have an illustration of it here. I wasn't sure, but now I know. And I know that one day Evie and I will have our hearts stop, eyes glaze, features contort, limbs stiffen, breath cease. And due to the ensuing stench that I experienced, this flesh will have to be disposed of, and quickly. The subsequent triune council determined the corrupted Dio must be driven from access to the tree of life. They can't be allowed to stay in the garden. With free access to the tree of life, and that was not the one that was forbidden, by the way, they'd still be alive today. 2017, they'd still be here. Along with 100 billion plus others on a planet struggling to support 6 billion dwellers today. 100 billion plus perverts, see for reference the flood scenario, who follow the serpent, can't die, have no fear of God. It is a horror scenario. Bottom line, they've got to be booted. We got to get them out of here. So our next point is the expulsion. You got to go, guys. You can't stay. And what was their reaction? Their knee-jerk reaction was resistance, reluctance. God, it's not fair. And some folks think God's not fair today. It's our home. We've known nothing else. You can't make us do this. But oh yes, God can make you do this. God can make you do anything He wants. It comes with the territory of being God. They lingered. They had to be sent, verse 23. Finally driven, verse 24. They went out west to east. West to east is the wrong way to be blessed. You can trace it down through history, and I could give you 20 examples of where west to east was not the right direction. There's one seeming exception, it would be Alexander the Great. He went the wrong way, and yet it seemed like he was blessed because he wasn't defeated, but you'll note he never got home. Guards are stationed at the entrance to the garden. Cherubim. Ezekiel 28, Ezekiel 1 describes these creatures, and there are 4 of them that are emplaced. Why 4? I mean, they're powerful. To keep just a couple of sinners out? Why 4 of them? There were originally 5, you'll remember, including Lucifer, who was the leader of the gang, and he was perfect. He was the best of the 5. He was the one stationed above the throne. Well, they would prevent man from sneaking back into the garden, little midnight requisitioning in order to obtain some of the fruit. Or more probably, 4 of them were placed so that their former primer inter terris might get the idea to distribute this fruit, this nectar of eternal life, to anyone born thereafter, which would induce them to be on his team. Quite a signing bonus. You'll live forever. I think he would have had a lot of takers. He's got a lot of takers today without that inducement. Well, clad in skins, driven from home, rudely thrust into a cruel, cursed, intimidating world, I can see this couple as they're forced out, slinking along in near panic. I see it also as a night scene. The sun is setting on the opposite side of the garden. Thus they are moving toward darkness. A few hundred yards out, they turn. And they see forms, fantastic forms, creatures framed by dancing fire in the garden. Their hearts sink into their sandals as they realize finally the finality of the judgment and the enormity of their offense. I suppose they might have even concluded, God looks at sin differently than we do. God thinks it's a little more serious than we do, which is also true today. All right, moving right along here, chapter 4. And now we're to the next outline, if you have it. Chapter 4. His story. History. Off and running. Now in the proto-evangelium prophecy, Genesis 3:15, remember the 2 seeds, the result was given, the result that would play out over thousands of years. But the fact of a protracted pitched war waged over several millennia and involving numerous near coups de grace on the woman's seed was unclear. The truth is, the 2 seeds with 2 fathers, John 8:44, or those in Christ and those in sin, or those that have imputable propensities, that is, if sin can't be held against them, are as easy to spot as a mouse and a moose. It wasn't as easy in the beginning. When the first babies were issued, it wasn't that easy, even for a mother, perhaps especially for a mother. The truth is, today, 2 seeds with 2 fathers, those in and out of Christ, are still choosing up sides. Man must choose up sides. And to provide a quick background for chapter 4, a number of things are implied for the thoughtful. There has been renewed contact with God and man, probably on a more formal basis involving a process, a time, a location, a substance, and an attitude. And those who complied to the letter were exercising faith. So there was faith in the Old Testament. There was faith before the law. It required faith under the law. It required faith after the law. It requires faith. Now it's applied a little bit differently at different times, but it must be part of the package. Faith involved acknowledging guilt and offering a substitute and subjecting pride. Now, as we move through here, I want you to look for a number of first mentions. A number of first mentions. That's not surprising since we're in Genesis. anything that crops up right away, as I first mentioned, but some of them are significant. First of all, the first offspring, or first sons, verses 1 and 2. Adam knew his wife. Adam knew his wife. Now, knew is he had sexual contact with her. And when properly interpreted and entertained, it's far more than just cohabitation. Marriage, fusion, one flesh. It's psychological, sociological, physiological, and spiritual fusion, all coming together on several different levels. And that's why two unsaved people can't really come together as a saved couple can come together in body, soul, and spirit. They don't have a dead spirit, they have a live spirit. So they keep, at least on 3 different levels, they can become one. It's a wonderful conception. It produces an entity or entities that is the sum of both, projecting both into the next generation and, in fact, generations to follow. It's quite a plan. And I have gotten a man from the Lord, et Yahweh. I have gotten a man from the Lord. Originally, they were guessing when they filled in and made it Yahweh. Originally, all they had was YHWH. That's what was being written. And then later, translators came along and said, I wonder what should be there. These boys in the Old Testament, the scribes. And that's what they came up with. I've gotten a man from the Lord, that is with the help of the Lord or under the direction of the Lord. Now, she was wrong. It was the devil or serpent seed, not Adam's, in some mysterious way. 1 John 3:12, of the wicked one. It emanated out of the wicked one. And according to Dr. Martin Luther, it showed she had gotten her heart right and had an attitude adjustment and was intent on fulfilling God's prophecy and correcting the problem that she had helped foster in the garden. Very speculative, I would say. Dr. Martin Luther is not always right, just as he wasn't in baby sprinkling. Verse 2, and she again bare his brother. You'll note there's no conception there. And Ruckman at least indicates the possibility that somehow, since there is no conception, that twins can be born somewhat separated from one another. And it was a different father, John 8:44. The Middle Ages, they taught that as absolute truth. I am not advocating it as absolute truth. All right, they were possibly twins here, even if normally conceived, because of the apparent single conception. Possibly. But we know that Cain was the elder. And when mankind chooses up sides, it will be spiritual and physical and eternal. They're going to get on one of these two teams, as we indicated. Now, the two boys are as different as night and day. I've had the unique experience of being the father of two boys. These two boys show up, and these two boys are as different as night and day. How could I have sired both of them? I sometimes wonder. She again bare his brother. They're different. They're as different as Jacob and Esau. They choose variant occupations. Cain was a farmer and Abel a shepherd. The division of labor that was complementary for the family. You got food from one kid, and you had the wherewithal to sacrifice to God from the other kid. So you had a whole lot covered by what they chose as an occupation. Now, I'm sure here, as the story carries on, that Cain felt his contribution was superior. I have two brothers. One's a fireman and the other a cop. Now Mike is still working, but Danny has retired now, the fireman. And they argued about who had the hardest job. And Danny, the fireman, he had this big easy chair, and he sat for 3 days and then got 3 days off. And Mike said, well, mine is the more significant because I'm out there stopping crime. And every time they got together, they argued about their jobs. Cain said, my contribution is superior. He did not understand that man does not live by bread alone, I guess. Cain means spear, or to forge, or iron. This is the first indirect allusion to iron, which usually sides with the wrong seed. If you come up with iron, you're probably in the wrong camp. Rome, that killed Jesus, was the Iron Empire. Goliath carried a big spear. He's a type of Antichrist, as is Cain. Joseph is hurt with iron fetters. I could give other examples, but we don't have time to go through it. 1 Samuel 23:7, Genesis 4:22, Deuteronomy 3:11, Numbers 35:16, Jeremiah 15:12, Daniel 2:33 and 43. The Antichrist is an archer. Nimrod was a hunter, which means that he had by this time iron-tipped spears. Nimrod. Esau was a hunter. You note they're on the wrong side. They have brothers that are more spiritual than they are, even though not more likable at times. Chariots of iron frustrated Israel in Judges in the early kingdom era. A spear, anything that is like a spear that is heaved and meant to do destruction would be covered by this. And what do we have today? Well, we have a 300 grain 7mm shells to go hunting with. We have cannon, which is a large spear turned skyward. We have things that protect us, supposedly. What are they called? Colorful names. Nike, Ajax, Minuteman, Pershing, Sidewinder, Ares, Tow, Sparrow, Cruise, and so help me, Nimrod. We have projectiles called Nimrod today. And they all support the world system. And they all are traceable back to Cain. And what does Jude 11 tell us? And we'll quote it a little later. Look out for the way of Cain. Look out for the way of Cain. Now Abel. Abel conversely means keeper, feeder, transitory, passing, vanity, vapor, or breath. What do we find in the Bible about breath? James 4:14. Life is a vapor. A vapor. It doesn't last very long, just as your breath goes out and disappears. In other words, Abel will be a short timer. He won't live his life out all the way. He's a type of Christ who pleased God, was cut off in early maturity, was a good shepherd, was a feeder of sheep, John 10:1-4, was a keeper of his father's flock, Ezekiel 34, and had his innocent blood spilled, Matthew 27:24. He is the first in the Hall of Fame, Hebrews 11, is righteous, is a prophet, Matthew 23:35 and Luke 11:50 and 51, is in type a saved man who possessed faith, imputed righteousness, and a covering of blood. And when he spoke as a prophet, he spoke the truth. All right, they're here. They're here. Now the first recorded offerings next. First recorded offspring, first recorded offerings. Verse 3, in process of time. A lot of this is planned out. I'm not saying everything that happens, God has said this has to happen and this has to happen. He knows what's going to happen. But some of it he plans out, as he did in Galatians 4:4. In the fullness of the time, God sent his Son, made of a woman, made under the law. He's a type of Christ. First in the Hall of Fame, Hebrews 11, speaks the truth. Now keep that in mind. Now the application, if you're going to make an application, is walk in the way of Abel. Don't walk in the way of Cain, walk in the way of Abel. And what did Abel do? He brought offerings. First recorded offering in the process of time. There was a time when they were to get together and give an offering. There was an appointed day. There was a schedule. They had to meet with God. It was probably, and I'm just going to guess here because it doesn't say explicitly, the Sabbath at the eastern gate of the garden. A time, a place, an interval before, during, and after the law, which way they were to meet, and when they met, they were to give an offering. And I imagine they made the appointments. They were there. By way of a spiritual analogy, if you knew God expected you at a place at an appointed time and would literally, physically be there, what would it take to deter you to replace that appointment with something a little more alluring? What would it take? Well, this is the time. We are here. God is here. You are here, which is where you're supposed to be. Some of our membership might not be here and won't be here at 11. They'll skip. I wonder how God looks at that. Hard question. What does he expect? Well, in analyzing the next few verses, we have to answer some questions, or at least pose some. Maybe we can't answer them. How old were the boys? Internal evidence suggests considerable time had elapsed. Some suggest as much as 200 years, although I think that is excessive, even given the time frames of that period. Was this their first contact with God? And I think the consensus, at least, would be no. No, even Cain did the right thing for a while. He just got tired of doing the right thing. No, scores, even hundreds of sacrifices had transpired before Cain decided to shake things up and upgrade things a little bit. Tip things in his favor. Well, what caused God's displeasure? His rejection of Cain's effort. As far as we know, no instructions directly were ever given about the sacrifices. Although, even though it's not recorded, I think instructions had been given. But we can't point it and definitely say, well, he flaunted God's rules here. But Adam and Eve, Dad and Mom, would have told them the story of the faux pas in the garden, and that there needed to be a blood sacrifice and a covering. They learned from their parents or learned from earlier family meetings with God just exactly how it was to be done. By this time, if the time scenario is right, they had done it scores of times themselves. Abel had the sheep, and I think that became a cause of the contention. Cain had to buy or trade for the wherewithal to approach God, and he increasingly resented it. Why should I line his pockets every week and listen to a sanctimonious sermonette to boot? You see, there's the profit deal. Abel was also a preacher. My efforts should be more appreciated. My work is a lot more attractive, beneficial, requires more work, more education, more skill. He just sits around and watches these sheep graze and grabs one, slits his throat, and then I have to pay for part of it. So Cain decided a new approach. Remember Nadab and Abihu? Strange fire on the altar. We'll bring something a little different. We'll upgrade. We'll modernize. So on one fatal Sabbath, in the spirit of pride, the spirit of flippancy, he approaches with his produce. God, what you see is what you get. You're going to have to be happy with what I decide to give you, with how I decide to approach you. I did the best I could with this stuff. Cain's fruit stand of good works. He came in the spirit of rebellion and independence. I'm the final authority on what is best for me. What finds me is what I'm going to go with. What is the word of God for me? I'm the master of my fate and the captain of my soul. His favorite singer was Frank Sinatra. I did it my way. Yeah, well, old Blue Eyes might find that his way wasn't the best way once he drew his last breath. Now picture the scene. The world's first apple polisher, or grape grabber maybe, approaches the eastern gate and sets up a fruit stand of pears and peaches and plums and cherries, any good thing to make us all merry. You know, religion has to be fun. It has to leave us feeling good. That's the approach today. We don't want to have our toes stepped on. We don't want to be raked. They used to say, boy, that was really good, preacher. You really nailed us today. Today, you didn't leave me feeling good when I walked out in the parking lot. What has flipped us in the age of Laodicea? Well, what else? Potatoes, carrots, radishes, turnips. Turnips? Did you ever hear you can't get blood out of a turnip? There's no blood involved in this thing, I'll tell you that. What is the missing ingredient? Maybe it was a grape. That's a type of blood, but wait a minute, it's not blood. If it's not the right type of blood, it's what? Sour grapes. And these turned out to be sour grapes. You can't get blood out of a grape either. No matter how much mumbo jumbo you say over it, Pope, hocus corpus, it changes into the literal blood and flesh of Jesus Christ once I say hocus. And that's where the kids got hocus pocus, by the way. There's a Catholic Mass, hocus corpus. Cain thinks, I know what Dad said, but this is so much prettier, so much more sanitary, more humane than the gory mess my brother will make later this afternoon or a few minutes from now. All that bleeding and blood and guts and gore, yuck. Besides, this stuff is special because I procured it myself. I'm responsible for it, not God. Me. So he folds his hands over his altar and he waits for the commendation of God. It doesn't come. Meanwhile, Abel shows up with his spotless sheep, the firstling, and the fat. Now, the fat is the best. Doesn't literally mean fat. It's the best. A practice later incorporated into the law, Leviticus 3:16. On an altar about 70 yards from his brother, he builds a fire. He slits the throat of the choice lamb, guts him, decapitates him, quarters him, and puts the best pieces on the fire. His brother Cain glances over and sighs, shakes his head, continues in prayer, hoping that God is going to show somehow that he's pleased with him, that he likes this upgrade. Brother Abel kneels and prays, "O Lord God, I've messed up several times again this week. I don't deserve to be in your presence. I'm just a sorry sinner in need of a covering, and I pray you'll accept one of your creatures that you sustained and nourished, and whose blood is a type of your spotless lamb to come in the future, that lamb that will be a final sacrifice. I know I deserve to be rejected. I know I deserve to have my blood spilled instead of the sacrifice. I know I deserve to wind up in hell, but please consider this bloody substitute as payment for my sins." There's a flash of light. Lightning comes down, hits the sacrifice. Light goes up. God is pleased. It is a commendation. And Abel, almost groveling in humility, experienced the warm glow of love and forgiveness. Now note here, this is the Old Testament economy. It's even pre-law. It was not a final atonement. They had to do this again, and again, and again, and again, and it covered them for a while, but then its effectiveness ran out. You had to keep coming back. Hebrews 9:28. Clearly, this thing is a prototype of the Lamb of God on the altar of Calvary's brow. Verse 5, "But unto Cain and his offering he had not respect." Everybody wants to have respect today, or as they put it, and I think not really grammatically correctly, they don't want to be disrespected. Cain's fruit stand of good works was obviously, jarringly repudiated, and the humiliated, crushed elder brother stalked petulantly and haughtily and angrily out of the presence of God. How dare God turn thumbs down on his sacrifice? The fruit stand, in case you haven't picked it up already, is also a type. It's a type of catechisms, sacraments, golden rules, eightfold paths, church memberships, 32nd degrees, baptisms, prayer wheels, healing meetings, tongues sessions, philanthropy. Anything that substitutes for the blood. That's what that is a type of. It's a whole stinking load of rotten produce called religion. Religion. If we had time, we could do a workup on what the Bible has to say about religion. So the Lord dumps this rotten fruit into a garbage heap of eternity. It is a type of hell, which is also in type the Valley of Hinnom, south of Jerusalem, the garbage dump of Jerusalem. a type of hell. Look out for the way of Cain. Look out for the way of Cain. Religion is what man does to justify himself. Salvation is what God does to justify man. Religion, which Cain had in abundance, fields of the stuff, is worse than chasing, cheating, stealing, lying, murder. At least from an eternal standpoint, it's worse. Jude 11, we've been alluding to it. Woe unto them, for they have gone in the way of Cain, and ran greedily after the error of Balaam for reward, and perished in the gainsaying of Kor. These are the three musketeers of hell. I have told myself a dozen times, this is a crackerjack sermon just waiting to be developed. Get on it, but I haven't done it yet. Maybe I still will while I've got my brains about me. The three-point outline that I've just roughed out, one is religion. Be very religious, but in the wrong way. Eliminate the blood. Eliminate the blood. That's Cain. Seek a popular, respectable, rewarding mode of worship. That's Balaam. That's Balaam, if you know the story. And then finally, become your own authority. That's Kor. The recipe for splitting hell wide open. It has to be his way. His way, not your way. His messy, gory, bloody, covering, death-dealing, arbitrary, solitary, humbling, atoning, soul-saving way. Beware the way of Cain. Go by the way of Abel. All right, Genesis 4, 6 through 8. We have the first murder. The first murder. If we pick up the narrative, Cain's fruit stand of good works has been repudiated, and the snubbed firstborn of earth in a silent, steaming rage has retreated from the area of Eden. Verse 6, most see an indeterminate interval between verses 5 and 6, so we'll paint it that way for our purposes as well. Just as occurred after the initial sin of the parents, God approaches the sinner, not the other way around. It's the Holy Spirit that draws. You didn't approach God. He first approached you. And you didn't deserve to even be approached, but he did it. Where he's lifted up, he'll draw all men. Now, we don't know the time interval again. Perhaps God showed up the very next day and demanded an accounting. Perhaps there was a little interval after Cain had missed 3 Sabbaths in a row. God made a call on him. That was, I think, at TBT all those years. 3 in a row, the preacher's supposed to show up. If you miss 3 in a row, you're establishing a habit. And so the preacher shows up to know why. What in the world's going on? So the preacher is there. And what does he ask? He asks, why? Do you ever consider the fact that why is a very demanding word? Somebody tells you you can't do something. Why? Well, then they have to come up with an answer. Ball's in their court after that. Whether you have done a bad thing or a good thing, motivation is important. Why? Why? Why did you do that? And I'm going to skip some material here because I'm running too far behind. Now, assuming the Lord's question is not rhetorical, a rhetorical question is you ask it and you don't expect an answer. You're just doing it for effect. I'm going to assume it's not rhetorical. Cain probably boldly decided that since God had snubbed him, he'd snub God. He'd return a favor. And either his answer was so puerile that it is not recorded, or no attempt was made. It was just silence. A tacit rejection of the divine initiative. So the Lord presses the issue a little further here. Now, verse 7 is an admittedly abstruse verse. Exactly what it means. And I've got 3 pages of stuff here trying to explain this verse that I'm not going to go into. I've been coming on Wednesday night, and I've learned something from a young whippersnapper. He's supposed to cover the whole Bible. You might note that with 50 chapters here, we're going to have to go in the next 6 weeks or so to get this all in. I've been going way too slowly. But that's just me. That's just what I've always done. I have a hard time breaking the pattern. But Eric, he just says, study this for yourself. We're moving on. He'll cover 2 books, I think, in a session. And I'm going to have to try to do something like that. But at any rate, this verse is difficult to unravel, and then you can't come to a definite conclusion. So we'll move on here. So it's God speaking. Cain, if you just play by the rules, and by the way, all the rules weren't written yet. This is before the law. Moses hadn't made his trip up the mountain. If you'll just play by the rules that you have, you'll be in the same boat as your brother Abel. And while New Testament style salvation is too strong, you'll be safe. You'll have temporary imputed righteousness, or more accurately, non-imputed sin. Salvation is not yet, again, a once-for-all time process, but you'll be okay. You'll be covered if you just stay in the boat where you're supposed to be. Also implied in this question is the inference Cain should already know what was self-evident truth. And I think, and we've established, that he did know. He knew what was right, and he knew the process. Like someone that knows the plan of salvation and has heard it all his life, but he just won't ever make a move. Also implied in this question is the inference Cain knew. Why is it then that most religions teach, well, you don't have to go by prescribed rules. Everybody's going to make it eventually. There's no such thing as hell. There may be a heaven, but there's not a hell. Do good, do the best you can, and guess what? Maybe you'll have done enough to be okay. Maybe. But we can never be sure. We can't know. It's elitist to say you know. It's terrible to say you're right and everybody else is wrong if they don't agree with you. Well, it's not us saying that we're right. We're saying the Word of God is right and everybody that disagrees with it is wrong. And Cain, keep on your present course. Sin, another first mention. Sin. What in the world is sin? And there's destruction. There's heartbreak. Because this sin, and it's personified like it's a real human being, will dominate your house or tent or tabernacle or your body which you are sojourning in on this earth. Sin is crouching. Sin is ready to spring. Sin wants you. It is a real universal entity. The Bible says fools make a mock of sin. Did you ever stop to think that there's very little that's sin anymore? At least as Americans view it or the world views it. Stuff that used to be wrong is no longer wrong anymore. I read something the other day where a preacher said, you know, profanity, it's just really part of our culture. Don't even worry about it. Don't make an issue out of it if you're a preacher. Taking the Lord's name in vain, not a big deal anymore. Sin is not just an explanation for doing wrong. It's not dualism. See for reference Greek and Persian philosophy. It is not privation, Leibniz. It is not illusion, Spinoza, or modern psychiatry, James. It is not the dearth of God consciousness, Schleiermacher. It is not traceable to an Oedipus complex, Freud. It is not opposing the king in his will, Reichel. It is not explainable by a dialectic, Hegel. It is not impeding man's self-determination, James, Dewey, and Russell. It is not that which injures the fellow man, Schuller. It is not a failure to be optimistic, Peel. It is not such a non-issue that we can safely ignore it, Osteen. Sin is serious. And you can't sin and get by with it, we hear men say. And you can't. For every sin, there is a just recompense. God has a penalty for sin. Sin is the transgression of the law, the Bible says. Whatever the law says and you violate it, it's sin. It's sin. Sin leads to judgment. And there's going to be judgment here because sin was just outside the door ready to spring. Is anybody gone so far they can't be forgiven? Could Cain have been forgiven at this point? If he just said, hey, okay, I was wrong, I beg you to forgive me. Can God save a murderer? Well, he did in Exodus 2. Or a drunkard, Genesis 9. Or an adulterer, 2 Samuel 11. Or a thief, Luke 23. Or a liar, Mark 14. Or a persecutor of the church and murderer, Acts chapter 8, the Apostle Paul. What about homosexuality? Well, 1 Corinthians says, and such were some of you, were, past tense. Yeah, they can be saved as well and forgiven. Well, who can't? Who is the exception? Who will not be forgiven? The Bible says a man too proud to follow the established modus of salvation, the rules. Too much pride to admit you're a sinner. Too much pride to walk an aisle. Too much pride to kneel at an altar. Too much pride to tell God you're a low-down rascal who deserves to rot in hell. Too much pride to realize and articulate the fact that you need forgiveness. You need an application of blood. You need the blood of Jesus Christ. You need the spotless lamb. And this fellow said, I'm not bringing a lamb. I'm bringing what I want to bring. All right, verse 8. Verse 8, first murder, doesn't clarify the matter of initiation, which is important if we're to determine premeditation. Luke 11:49 through 51. Verse 49, I will send. The Samaritan Pentateuch. And I was on a Holy Land trip one time, and this old priest up in Samaria had a copy of the Samaritan Pentateuch. Old thing. He got it out and allowed us to touch it. So I have touched the Samaritan Pentateuch. What does that mean? I don't know. But the Samaritan Pentateuch has Cain luring Abel into the field out of the sight of witnesses to enact the first cold-blooded, premeditated, dry-gulching, ambush, murder, execution, hit, whatever you want to call it, has this thing going down in that way. The likely Bible scenario, based on Luke 11, is that Abel sent by God for a purpose. Now, what was this purpose? in going out there and getting himself in harm's way? I think it was to preach. He was a prophet. He was going to try to win his brother. And he began preaching. Look, man, you've known since you were 5 years old the right way to approach God. And that right way is through the innocent blood of a spotless lamb. Dad told you that. You've done it yourself. Then you show up with pumpkins and oranges and grapes and kumquats, like approaching God was some kind of a supermarket shopping spree. You know that salvation is not by works, not by works of righteousness, but lest any man should boast. No, I know that's Ephesians, and I know it hadn't been written yet. I know all that, but the basic message was, I'm sure, conveyed. You know that all our righteousnesses are as filthy rags. You know that and a lot more. You know the Bible that God has for you up to this point. You know it. Then you have the gall to blame God, throw a tantrum, show no respect for God at all. What is the matter with you? I'm here to set you straight, brother. I'm here to give you a chance to repent. Now, what was the reaction? And if you don't do it, you're going to hell. If you approach people like that out there, what are they going to say to you? You think it'll be a favorable response? They'll throw their arms around you? Cain, stung by this message, says, you bloody fanatic, you smell like little younger brother. Who do you think you are preaching to me? God's little fair-haired favorite chosen one, following all God's petty little rules to the T. How dare you come down on me, you emotional cripple? I don't need you and I don't need God. At this point, his knuckles are turning white on his hoe. If anything, my offering was superior to your lousy, disgusting, gory, old-fashioned, lowbrow, anachronistic bloodletting. By this time, the preacher's getting a little steamed. Don't you think? I mean, preachers, they're not all the way glorified yet. They can lose it too. I'm just imagining here. As Brett would say, spiffballing. Oh yeah? Well, how come mine was accepted and yours rejected then? Big brother, if you don't make a swing back to the right, you're going to hell. You're going to hell. I'm telling you, you're going to hell. Why, you self-righteous, sanctimonious, pious little blankety-blank. Get the blankety-blank out of my field. In a blind rage, up goes the hoe. Cain is poised to come down like a lumberjack and carve about 4 inches out of Abel's skull. He throws up his staff to block it. The hoe, being heavier, splits the staff. Knocks the shepherd to the ground. Down comes the instrument again and again and again and again and again. Back, neck, head. And finally, there's no movement. I think I've alluded to it a couple of times here. I mean, in the past, but when we were in Springfield, we saw a road rage incident on Campbell Avenue where things got so out of hand that a guy got out with a baseball bat. There were 2 guys and 2 women. They got involved in a fight. And one of them had a baseball bat, and he knocked the other one down and just went to town on him. I mean, he probably hit him 15 times with this bat. Men rushed out of stores and rushed over in order to restrain this guy, and they finally got him restrained. Brett and I got out of our car. We were about 3 or 4 back and raced up there as well, but it was more or less over by the time we got there. The guy with the bat, his ankle went like this and was just busted like I have never seen. And I am sure he would have killed the guy if he hadn't been restrained, who was lying in a pool of blood, unconscious, and he was still going at him at that point. You know that you're dealing with a psychopath when they don't realize there is a stopping point, and you stop when you get to that point, when things are getting too serious or too dangerous, and you stop. Cain, talking about first mentions here, it doesn't exactly say it, but Cain is the first psychopath. He wasn't going to stop until this guy quit moving. And he wasn't all that familiar with death either. And I imagine just as a hunter, when he downs, say, a deer, he walks up, is he really dead? And what does he do? He'll poke him with his gun, with his rifle. He'll poke him. No movement, okay, he's dead. And I'm sure that's basically what happened here. He hated his preaching brother. He hated him. And I'll just end with this. The world hates you when you represent God, when you represent your Savior. They hate you. They can talk about peace and love and broad-mindedness all they want, but when it comes to confronting God's man, giving God's word, or the book, they hate the book, they hate the man, they hate the word, they hate the way. This is the first hater. All right, we'll stop here. I'm not near where I should be, but I promise you we will accelerate because we have to. All right, you're dismissed.